Hello, today we're going to be talking about the Watergate Scandal, or how a president was brought down. At the conclusion of this presentation, you should be able to do these things. Explain how Nixon used executive privilege to aid in the cover-up of the Watergate Scandal, and discuss the effect that Nixon's scandals had on how we view government officials. The Watergate scandal is one of the darkest moments in American history. It signals the downfall of a president and severely impacts our perception of elected officials. Prior to the scandal, Nixon had been immensely popular. During his re-election campaign in 1972, he won 520 electoral votes, losing only the state of Massachusetts. Even before his landslide victory, accusations of corruption began. By October of 1973, his vice president, Spiro Agnew, had resigned while facing charges of extortion, tax fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. Agnew was replaced by Gerald Ford in December of 1973, which was convenient because Nixon was facing a scandal of his own. In June of 1972, prior to his landslide election win, 5 men were caught breaking into the Democratic Party headquarters at the Watergate Complex in Washington, D.C. Initially, little was thought of the incident until a story in the Washington Post linked those 5 men to the Nixon administration. Richard Nixon quickly dismissed these accusations and countered that the article was misleading and biased against him. Nixon won re-election, but the scandal didn't go away. It soon became clear that the White House and the aptly named Committee to Re-elect the President, or CREEP, had been sabotaging the Democrats. In July of 1973, before Agnew resigns, one of the officials being investigated revealed that Nixon had a secret taping system that recorded conversations and phone calls in the White House. These recordings were then subpoenaed by the courts to use in their investigation of the president. However, Nixon refused to turn over the audio recordings, citing executive privilege. He tried instead to release transcripts and then only sections of the tapes. Eventually, the Supreme Court got involved and ordered Nixon to release the full tapes, but when he did, 18 and a half minutes of the tapes had been erased by accident. Throughout this process, the opinion of Nixon began to decline. He even began to lose the support of his own party. Additional charges of corruption and wrongdoing began to plague the president. Many of these accusations mirrored those of his former vice president, Spiro Agnew. Finally, in August of 1974, the tapes were released that confirmed Nixon not only knew about the break-in at the Watergate, but had participated in the cover-up. Impeachment proceedings had already begun in the House and the Senate, and Nixon saw any support that he once had quickly disappear. Even Vice President Ford, who had unconditionally supported the president, submitted his letter of resignation. Nixon, however, refused to accept Ford's letter of resignation and told him the country would need the vice president in the coming days. Nixon himself resigned on August 9, 1974, only a year and a half into his second term as President of the United States. He remains the only president to resign from office. As a result of the Watergate scandal, many Americans began to question the actions of their elected officials. Overall, Americans trusted their government less. Checking for understanding. What did Nixon believe executive privilege entitled him to do? Also, what effect did the Watergate scandal have on the American people?